a Quinn Martin production starring Buddy Ebsen, also starring Lee Merriweather, Mark Shera, with guest stars Don Johnson, Nancy Wolfe, Edward Walsh, Christina Hart, Betty Ackerman, Victor Mojica. Tonight's episode, Renegade's Child. The morning sun hung low over the rolling hills, casting long shadows across the highway where the heavy military transport truck rumbled forward with a steady, rhythmic hum. Inside the cab, the driver shifted his grip on the wheel, glancing over at his companion with a relaxed grin. He was a veteran of the road, a man whose life had been shaped by years of disciplined service. He stretched his shoulders and looked out at the open road ahead, feeling the simple comfort of routine. He told his friend that he should really consider following his example and re-enlisting as soon as his first hitch was up. The younger man chuckled softly, looking out the window as the landscape blurred past. The veteran smiled, emphasizing that becoming a 30-year man was not a bad path at all. After all, he remarked with a light laugh, serving in this man's arm was the only steady job he had ever known. Suddenly, a dark vehicle surged past them, cutting sharply across the lane and forcing the driver to step hard on the brakes. The heavy transport lurched to a halt along the narrow shoulder of Aliso Canyon. Before the driver could fully grasp what was happening, masked men stepped out, their expressions hidden and their intentions clear. The veteran driver tried to keep his voice calm, telling the intruders that he was giving them the whole road and asking if they understood. The lead hijacker, a sharp and impatient man named Wayne, barked a quick affirmative, commanding everyone to get out and face away from the vehicle. He warned them that if anyone turned around, there would be severe consequences. In the brief chaos that followed, a tense struggle broke out. A brave man tried to intervene, refusing to let the heavy cargo fall into the wrong hands. A sharp sound echoed through the canyon, and the quiet rhythm of the morning was instantly broken. When the dust settled, the reality of what had happened set in. Pete lay still on the ground. Wayne stood frozen for a second, holding the weapon, while his companion gasped in horror. Julie, a young woman who had been swept into this dangerous world against her better judgment, stared at Wayne with tears brimming in her eyes. She reminded him with a trembling voice that he had promised nobody was going to get hurt. Wayne swallowed hard, pushing his own rising panic down. He urged everyone to start moving immediately, knowing that time was running out. When another accomplice asked about the rest of the guns left behind in the transport, Wayne pointed out that if the driver had managed to get through to anyone on the radio, the entire canyon would soon be swarming with authorities. He instructed them to head back to their designated meeting place without delay. One of the men hesitated, asking Wayne what was going to happen to him. Wayne assured him that nothing had changed, reminding him that their faces were covered and nobody had seen what they were driving. They had to stick to the plan and keep moving. Meanwhile, on a quiet stretch of highway further down the valley, a blue sedan was rolling carefully through a police roadblock. They had not wasted any time setting up checkpoints across the district. Inside the sedan, Wayne sat behind the wheel, his jaw set, while a young woman sat in the passenger seat, holding a small, sick child wrapped in a blanket. Wayne muttered under his breath that they would have been long gone by now if they had not been forced to stop at that frustrating motel. The woman told him to be quiet as an officer approached the window. The officer tipped his hat politely and asked for identification, explaining that a serious robbery had taken place nearby. He asked Mr. Lockwood if he could take a quick look in the back seat. Wayne put on a relaxed, weary smile and agreed immediately, adding a gentle request for the officer to be quiet because the young boy had a heavy cold and had finally fallen asleep. The officer looked in, saw the sleeping boy named Jody, and expressed his sympathy to the mother. The woman sighed softly, explaining that they were completely exhausted after staying up all night nursing the sick child. The officer thanked them for their cooperation, apologized for the inconvenience, and wished them a safe trip before waving them through the roadblock. Once they were safely down the road, the tension in the car released slightly, though an underlying friction remained. A woman in the vehicle complained about the delay, while Wayne criticized her handling of the situation at the motel, pointing out that she was supposed to keep young Jody out of the swimming pool so his cold would not get worse. The argument bubbled up briefly, reflecting the strain of a life spent constantly on the run, before settling into a heavy silence as they drove deeper into the city. In a bright, bustling legal office in downtown Los Angeles, the atmosphere was entirely different. Sunlight poured through large windows, highlighting orderly bookshelves and neat wooden desks. Barnaby Jones, a seasoned and gentle private investigator with a sharp mind and a warm heart, was speaking with a visitor. Beside him was J.R. Jones, a bright and ambitious young law associate who had recently arrived from Chicago, ready to bring his legal sharp-mindedness to the team. An older woman, Mrs. Nesbit, sat in one of the comfortable chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was waiting anxiously for her daughter, Julie, who was finally being released after serving time for a supermarket robbery she had been dragged into years ago. Mrs. Nesbit admitted how difficult it had been, mentioning that it had been 7 long years since Julie ran away from home with her friend Betty, living a nomadic life across communes in New Mexico and Arizona with a reckless young man named Wayne Lockwood. Mrs. Nesbit expressed her sorrow, sharing that she had not even known she had a grandson named Jody until the boy was nearly a year old. When the inner door opened, Julie stepped into the room. She looked hesitant, dressed in simple, neat clothes that her mother had sent for her. Mrs. Nesbit stood up immediately, her eyes filled with tears. The reunion was gentle and filled with quiet emotion. Julie looked at her mother and thanked her for the clothes, mentioning with a modest smile that she had not changed much over the years, except perhaps that she had grown up a little. Her mother embraced her warmly, agreeing that they both had grown through the long separation. J.R. Jones observed the heartwarming scene and quietly offered a box of handkerchiefs, knowing how powerful such moments of family reconciliation could be. Once the initial emotion settled, the conversation turned to the most important task at hand, finding young Jody. Julie explained that when she was arrested years ago, Wayne had taken the boy and disappeared. She wanted nothing more than to recover her son and build a peaceful, honest life with her family. Barnaby Jones assured Mrs. Nesbit and Julie that they were fully committed to bringing the entire family back together. Barnaby brought out a photograph that had been taken approximately 18 to 19 months earlier, showing Wayne Lockwood standing near a distinct pickup truck. Only a portion of the license plate was visible in the photo. Barnaby asked Julie to concentrate and try to remember if there were any specific letters on that plate. Julie thought back carefully, recalling how much trouble they had experienced with that old truck. She remembered with a sudden light of realization that Wayne had jokingly referred to the vehicle as a jinx, spelling out the letters J and X for the custom plate. With that vital clue, Barnaby was able to trace the registration through the Department of Motor Vehicles, leading him to a man named Cy Rogers. Barnaby and Julie tracked Cy down at a local auto shop. Cy was surprised to see Julie, noting that looking at her was like seeing a ghost from 7 years ago, back when everyone wore flowers in their hair and dreamed of changing the world into something soft and peaceful. Julie listened with a sad, reflective smile, admitting that while those dreams had been beautiful, Wayne had lost his way when he graduated from minor misdeeds to serious crime. Cy confirmed that he had purchased the truck from Wayne several months ago and mentioned that Wayne had young Jody with him at the time. However, Cy had not seen Wayne recently. He suggested that a photographer named Rudy Bates, who used to take photos of everyone in their old circle, might have seen Wayne more recently near Venice Beach. Acting on a lead, Barnaby visited Rudy Bates at a commercial photography studio where bright lights and colorful backdrops were set up for an advertising shoot. Rudy remembered seeing Wayne briefly on the beach a couple of months ago, but he did not know his current whereabouts. However, Rudy mentioned another associate named Leo Shinsun, whose father worked for the railroad. Rudy recalled that Leo often stayed at his father's house near Topanga Canyon. Meanwhile, in a quiet park hidden away from the main streets, Wayne Lockwood was meeting with a sharp-eyed fence named Griff, who operated out of Markham Imports. Wayne was offering a dangerous shipment of heavy weapons that had been stolen from the military transport. Griff looked over the inventory, carefully assessing the risk, and offered $3,500. Wayne pushed back, insisting on $4,000 for the lot and reminding Griff of the high value of the merchandise. Griff pointed out that the violent nature of the theft made the goods difficult to move, but after a tense negotiation, they agreed on a higher figure of $5,000. While Wayne conducted his business, young Jody was waiting nearby with Amanda, a young woman traveling with them. Jody complained that he was hungry, asking his father if they could get a hamburger, French fries, and a vanilla milkshake. Wayne's tone softened when he looked at his son. He smiled, patting the boy on the shoulder, and promised that they would go get some food right away. Back at the legal office, Barnaby, JR, and Betty were putting together the pieces of the puzzle. Betty, a capable and resourceful associate, researched the railroad records to locate Leo Shenson's father, finding an address up on Candlefoot Road, near the top of Topanga Canyon. JR was busy studying for his upcoming bar exam, reading through legal codes and statutes. Barnaby gave him the playful pop quiz regarding forestry laws under Penal Code 593A, offering a lighthearted moment of mentorship before setting out to investigate the canyon address. When Barnaby arrived at the secluded property near Topanga Canyon, he found that trouble had already struck. A local neighbor named Ralph, who knew the elder Mr. Shinsun from church, informed Barnaby that a shooting had just occurred up the hill. A desperate individual had attempted a robbery, resulting in a tragic conflict that left Leo Shinsun dead. The young woman who had been staying at the cabin, Amanda, had fled down the hill in a hurry, while Wayne had packed up his belongings, taken young Jody, and disappeared in his blue van. Barnaby drove quickly down the canyon road and spotted Amanda hitchhiking along the shoulder. He pulled over and offered her a ride. As Amanda got into the car, assuming she was just getting a lift from a regular driver, Barnaby introduced himself as a private investigator hired by Jody's mother to find the child. He explained that the authorities would soon be asking tough questions about what happened at the cabin. Amanda, realizing the gravity of the situation, insisted that she had nothing to do with the violence and explained that a stranger had robbed them of their money, prompting Wayne to gather Jody and flee in the van. She admitted that Wayne was desperate for funds and would likely contact his contact, Griff, to turn over whatever merchandise he had left. Armed with the name Griff, Barnaby coordinated with Lieutenant Biddle at the local police station. They identified the suspect as Griffith P. Markham, an importer based in Studio City who is suspected of dealing in illegal arms transfers. Realizing that a direct approach was needed to locate Wayne before any further danger came to young Jody, Barnaby devised a clever plan. Dressing in a distinguished jacket and adopting the confident, commanding demeanor of an international buyer, Barnaby walked directly into Griffith Markham's office at Markham Imports. Playing the role of a high-level purchaser representing overseas interests, Barnaby expressed interest in securing a large shipment of heavy equipment and military hardware. Markham, intrigued by the prospect of a massive payout, admitted that he was expecting a major delivery within a few hours. Barnaby set a strict deadline, stating that he would return at 5 o'clock sharp with full payment if the goods were ready for inspection. Outside, Betty and JR were monitoring the location in communication with Barnaby. They observed a suspicious vehicle heading toward a remote staging area near the hills. Wayne Lockwood had organized one final exchange, believing that this transaction would provide enough money for him and Jody to start a new life far away from their past troubles. However, as the delivery vehicle pulled into the clearing, Markham and his armed associates arrived to take control of the shipment. Wayne stepped out of the van, carrying young Jody in his arms, hoping to finish the deal quickly. Suddenly, Barnaby Jones appeared on the scene, stepping forward with calm authority and demanding that everyone drop their weapons. Markham, realizing that his buyer was actually an investigator working alongside law enforcement, drew his firearm and attempted to use the confusion to his advantage. In a desperate move, Markham reached out toward young Jody, hoping to use the child as leverage to secure his escape. Wayne Lockwood's protective instincts instantly took over. Seeing his young son in direct danger, Wayne stepped between Markham and the boy, shielding Jody with his own body. He called out to his son, telling him to stay back and return to safety. Barnaby moved swiftly, disabling Markham's armed henchmen and securing the area just as the sirens of approaching law enforcement vehicles echoed through the canyon. The police arrived quickly, taking Markham and his associates into custody and ensuring that the scene was entirely secure. The long ordeal had finally come to an end, cleared of violence and shadow by the steady determination of those who sought truth and justice. A short time later, near the quiet edge of the clearing, the blue van stood with its doors open. Young Jody sat inside, safe and unharmed, looking out with wide, curious eyes. Julie stepped forward from the arrival vehicle, her heart beating fast as she looked at her son for the first time in years. Jody looked at the gentle woman walking toward him, recognizing the warmth in her eyes. He called out softly, asking if she was his mommy. Tears of pure joy overflowed down Julie's cheeks as she reached into the van and wrapped her arms around her little boy, holding him tight against her heart. She assured him that she was indeed his mother, promising that they would never be parted again. Nearby, Wayne looked on quietly. Though he faced accountability for his past choices, a look of profound relief washed over his face, seeing his son reunited with Julie in a safe, loving environment. Julie looked back at Wayne with a gentle, forgiving expression, recalling the early days when they were young and full of hopeful dreams for a better world. Barnaby Jones stood beside Mrs. Nesbit and JR, watching the family heal. The quiet strength of love, responsibility, and human kindness had prevailed over darkness, offering a clear path toward a bright and hopeful future for young Jody and his family.